I will call this regular meeting of the Waterbury Selectboard for Monday, February 17th to order at 7:01 p.m. We are live in the Steel Room and also on Zoom. Our first item of business is to approve the agenda. As just one informational note, I will note that often this board has done executive session as our final item. Folks will note that we have executive session earlier in our agenda and an item of reviewing the town meeting motions after. That was to accommodate the schedule of our town moderator, Rebecca Ellis, who also had a 7 to 9 p.m. commitment. So just noting that we do anticipate this is a case where, if approved, we would do executive session and then come back for the final town meeting review so that Rebecca can be present with us for her schedule. That context aside, would anyone like to make a motion with regards to the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as written.
I'll second it.
Motion by Kane, second by Roger to approve the agenda as written. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? All right, the agenda is approved. Our next item is the consent agenda with 2 items. The first, approval of 3 sets of meeting minutes, special meeting January 27th, special meeting January 29, and regular meeting February 3rd. The second, a first-class restaurant/bar, third-class restaurant/bar, and outside consumption permit for Blush Hill Country Club. Is there a motion with regards to the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
There-
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Kane on the consent agenda. Any questions? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Right, consent agenda is approved. Next up is the public. This is an opportunity for anyone who would like to speak on an item that is not already on the approved agenda. We would ask that you keep your comments to about 3 minutes, and if we need additional time, we can schedule it for a future meeting agenda. Anyone who would like to speak on public comment? Yes, Sandy, would you mind just coming up? Mike had his hands up too, but I called on you, so we'll let you start.
Okay. A couple weeks ago, I sent an email asking about whether or not the local options tax had a restriction on the spending, and I wondered if you folks had had an opportunity to look into that.
Restriction on spending for local option tax?
Right.
So the answer is no, unless the voters force a restriction.
Okay. All right.
But
So
yeah, I mean, I can elaborate. The longer answer is that, 2024 was a bit unique because it was new and not planned. 2025, there's 625,000-ish in the budget going for voter approval.
And just to say, I think Sandy's question, if I understand it correctly, is around allowable uses of the local option tax, right? And clarification on that,
So, that being said, the budget is not a contract, it's a plan. And so if something were to happen during the course of the year and the select board were to utilize some portion of the tax that wasn't specifically approved in the budget, that is something within their purview. But we tried to budget everything that was reasonably planned for.
Okay.
In terms of allowable uses, you did make an email comment about social service agencies. And there is a section under the law related to funding social service agencies, and I think that's, my interpretation of that law is, when we fund a social service agency, look at the end of your warning, all those items, we don't give them that money with constraints. We simply say, we think, pick your agency, Red Cross, you do great things, here's $500 or $1,000. But local option tax money is given for a specific purpose. Even the WADA example that's a specific allocation to rebuild a specific section of trail. How we pay them in the end is just something I'll work out. But it's not a unfettered allocation. It was made with an exact purpose, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just a quick thing on the water, you did put it in I did see it a few times, but I wondered why it says repairs on trails, and it didn't mention that it was bike trails. It just says repairs on trails on Perry Hill, and it makes it sound like it's on town property, and it's not.
I don't know, I guess I just assume that people know WADA and that it's mountain biking, but.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Mike, you had your hand up, and then Lisa.
Well, please, go ahead.
Okay.
Mine's very short.
I don't like public speaking, so I wrote what I wanted to say. In light of the growing concerns around corruption at the highest levels of government and the increasing need for checks and balances, I feel now is an appropriate time to address the topic of public comment at our select board meetings. As I have no doubt you will all agree, public engagement is vital to the success of a democracy. It enables the government to better understand and incorporate the public needs, concerns, and values into its decisions around policy and projects, thus leading to decisions that are truly in the best interest of we the people, who they are bound by oath to represent rather than themselves. Over the last several years, I've observed new restrictions being placed on public comments in terms of time limits. While 5 minutes used to be the standard amount of time allotted for public comment, this time has been reduced to 3 minutes. While I certainly understand and respect the need for brevity due to the enormous amount of business that must be conducted at our meetings, I have rarely seen an occasion where an additional minute or two could possibly be disruptive to the stated agendas. As such, I would like to ask the board to consider allowing public comment at the start of the Waterbury Select Board meetings to be limited to no less than 5 minutes, unless an unusually large number of public members are requesting time to speak during this portion of the meeting.
Thank you.
Any comments that I need to respond to while I'm sitting here?
Not if you don't want to.
I don't have a problem with people speaking 5 minutes. As a matter of fact, I sometimes don't think we police the 3 minutes.
Yeah, I don't remember that I mean, I asked people to keep it to 3 minutes.
Right.
Just because if 3 more people are speaking, I usually allocated 10 minutes for the public comment period. I don't have any particular problems of expanding that to 5 minutes if that's the will of the board.
Agreed. And I would say I adopted the prior script upon assuming the role all of 8 weeks ago. In general, I think the goal of our rules of procedure, which I will name, we do have to update at the beginning of every year. So our first meeting in March, we will formally go over the ones that are printed on the bulletin board. So to the extent we want to make any adjustments, we could formally adopt them then. But speaking for myself, as I said, I adopted the prior script, but happy to adjust further. Mike, you had a hand up?
Yes, I did. Mine will probably take under 1 minute.
We're averaging, no.
Okay. I just want to give a big thanks to all the folks in Public Works. You know, we had a 19-inch snowfall, and I think the roads and byways and sidewalks are in amazingly good condition considering the amount of, and it was taken care of in a very expeditious manner. So here's to them, and I'd be willing to buy a pizza for all the people who are workers.
Yeah, pizza.
Pizza on Mike.
They'll be willing to eat it.
Yeah, let them know. It's on Mike.
Yeah, there you go.
All the time.
Hey, it's a thankless
They did it
job,
right. They
you know,
did it
and
right.
you gotta recognize the folks that do these things.
Yeah, they'll be out the rest of the week knocking down the snow piles and then in the village doing a lot of snow removal where they can dump it at down near the ice center.
That's gonna be the next challenge, is where to put the snow if we don't get any thaws and stuff.
Are we running out of space down at the, beyond the ice center, or no?
Not yet.
Okay, good.
This is our first big snowstorm.
It's huge, yeah. Yeah, we got snow all over the place.
Any other comments? Noting that we're right on schedule with the agenda at 7:10. I will add a personal note on public comment just to acknowledge that this is Ian's last regular meeting. You will be at town meeting, but I understand you're not pursuing re-election, but just want to acknowledge that and thank you for your service and year on the board. All right. With that, we will move to flood resiliency updates and overview. So recognizing this is something we've covered in many bits and pieces at prior meetings, we have 20 minutes on the agenda now to do some comprehensive end tying together and thinking about next steps. And Tom has provided some written information for us as well.
Yes, and I just see a typo on the first page, but
I was going to ask you what that word was. I Googled it, but would you mind sharing it, Tom? Because it wasn't posted. Sorry.
if I can, give me a minute here, I'm not sure if I can, there's. Maybe one that I just did here. Okay, cannot minimize one. Let me just pause the recording for a minute.
Recording stopped.
May not be able to with this
Record
one.
again, just so that it's not freaking out.
So I think I put this
Recording
together.
in progress.
Just
Compute-
open whatever you need to open. It should be okay. No?
Yeah, I can probably do that.
Let me just get a screen share. Woohoo!
Here we go, okay, now.
Yeah. Woohoo!
Actor off.
Thank you, and also happy to help tech assist in the future. Right. All right, so with some real-time readjusting of wording for relocation.
So I just created a brief rundown of some of the things that have happened since December of 2023. FEMA buyouts, 9 of which were approved by the select board. 1 owner has since withdrawn and sold his property or is in the process. 3 are now at the appraisal stage. It's taken a long time to get there. One of the properties in the appraisal stage has some environmental history, and so it's going to take a bit of a longer time for that one to close. But Natural Disaster Committee, we did make an offer to the owner of Harvey Farm property. We did submit a big hazard mitigation pre-application in 2024, which was, we had thought at the time, was the real opportunity to get some projects funded, and as it turns out, we didn't get anything funded because they are 4x overprescribed, and they're still working out how they're going to allocate things. So we haven't gotten a no, but we certainly haven't gotten a yes, and the big challenge there is the collective cost of the buyouts statewide, which eats up a lot of that. So there's just not a lot left over from their $90 million. I did hire Dana Allen late in 2024 to help go after grants, and that's, I think, starting to pay off because we've got a pretty comprehensive list of opportunities out there and a schedule, and he's beaten the bushes for me on some options. We do have a pretty significant grant through REFA. There's a portion of Thatcher that eroded, and there's a sewer line that's exposed, so we're gonna harden that area and armor the sewer line, but as part of it too, there's also some measures that we can reduce the velocity of the stream, and that's good for the sewer line, but I think it's also good for the flood resiliency of the area. We also now have a formal natural disaster preparedness committee. Been a lot of action this past month, and I think what it's gonna culminate with is we're trying to arrange a meeting with Vermont Emergency Management, with Pat Moulton, who's one of the flood czars for the state, Roy Schiff, who was a consultant for SLR that's working on the hydrology, Dana, who's my consultant for grants, and Central Vermont Regional Planning, and a few other partners. Had a meeting with Central Vermont Regional Planning last week, and I think we're all frustrated that the cornfield has been a project on everyone's list for over a decade now, and we're hoping that maybe we can kickstart it and get a path forward on the cornfield. Pat Moulton, who's, I don't know her exact title with the state right now, but I call her the flood czar. is interested in that and interested in kickstarting that conversation and that process. There is also a pending bill that was introduced by Representative Wood to transfer the ownership of the cornfield to the town. And then we're also getting a little bit of free work. I don't have the details. I just got it today and haven't fully read it, but the UVM students today passed along a detailed 10-ish page proposal about the scope of work they want to pursue, but I think it's going to focus on the ability to take a portion of that cornfield and have it essentially rewilded into a natural wetland, which should generate some flood storage capability there. And you can do that, I think, without losing the recreational trails. So there's some study going on there, some work going on there, but I mostly just wanted to summarize where we're at. The brick grant that the select board approved a few weeks ago will be submitted by the end of the month. It's essentially ready to go, might well be submitted tomorrow or the next day. And something I think about is if that grant isn't funded, perhaps it will be time to consider town funds to advance some of the hydrology work.
Great. Board questions or comments? I have a couple of notes I'm happy to start with. One, I would so thank you, Tom, for preparing this. I think it's really useful to have this in one place, and maybe hopefully we can get it on the website or somewhere for more folks to see. To me, I do think it would probably be worth naming that this is a summary of municipal resiliency efforts, just naming we are the select board, we are working on behalf of the town, but I do just feel like it's appropriate to acknowledge there's individual resiliency efforts, there's nonprofit resiliency efforts. We're a piece of this puzzle, we're the municipal piece. Two other things I just wanted to name is July 2024, we did have some input meetings with community members around brainstorming ideas at the fire station. I know that's certainly something some folks have mentioned interest in revisiting. And then in August 2024, we also had the hazard mitigation plan, which we approved. We all provided input on proposed activities and then ultimately adopted. I know it took a little while for the state to then ultimately approve it, but just in terms of this, casting a wide net in terms of what we're considering and creating a plan, those were just two others I wanted to name for our timeline. Other questions? Roger and then Mike.
I also just wanted to mention that Crew has set up a flood mitigation committee. They're looking at it from a household resiliency standpoint, not one of these larger public projects. And it's met once, and it'll be meeting again next month. And then I also had a question about the timing of the UVM students. Do we know when they're going to undertake this study?
They have until, I believe, Friday to submit the plan of study to their professor, who will ultimately approve it. So I've got the week to read it, and I can share it to get other input.
But is this a proposal for the summer or next fall, or is that clear?
I believe it's for the semester.
This semester? Okay, cool. Thank you.
Great.
And I
Mike?
do-
Oh, sorry.
Yes, Thomas, in regards to your comment about using municipal funds if we don't get the grant, how would that work in terms of the budget? I know we're proposing it, what we're gonna do in the budget that's gonna be approved. I assume the grant decision may not be before town meeting.
No.
Where would we look at shifting money?
To be determined, I think. But some of it could be the fact that we, the budget has about $625,000 in local option taxes. I anticipate that's far below what we'll actually collect. There's also a bill that would allow us to keep more of the local option tax.
Okay.
That has a lot of co-sponsors, so I'm feeling reasonably confident about that. And then part of it depends on the timing of when we're notified about the brick grant or not notified.
We have some wiggle room. It makes me feel a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, and this study would take place over 2 years.
Yeah, less than enough.
Other questions or comments, Tom? I don't know if you want to scroll to the next page. I don't know that you talked through the since January. I know you mentioned some of it, but, oh yeah, we're already there. Sorry. No, you're good. You're
One
good.
thing I do want to mention, this just drives home how some of these things take a long time. Last week, I worked with Vermont Emergency Management. They submitted to FEMA the final closeout paperwork for the elevation of 5 Healy. I believe that construction project was done 8 or 9 years ago. So it's just taken that long to get all that paperwork to the finish line. Sometimes these things are just not, federal government's not always fast moving. Last but not least, I also want to say, I don't have a public announcement yet, but I hope in the next couple of weeks that we will have a natural disaster preparedness coordinator formally inked, which will be nice.
It's very exciting.
Also on the long time horizon, all of these buyouts are from 2023, correct? Or the eligibility was based on the 2023 disaster. There is still a yet to be determined unknown potential of.
There's still 5 that we haven't heard a word from, and they take them in the order in which they receive them.
Yeah.
And even the 3 that have been approved at the, for appraisals, I received notice of that close to a month ago now, and I don't believe the appraisals have happened, so it all just takes a while. And then, of course, they've got to figure out how to appraise properties based on their July 10th, 2023 value.
Other questions or comments on this? Anyone online? I think there might be one person below Billy, maybe not. I'm gonna go down on that, yeah.
Kane's got his hand up.
Oh, thank you, Kane.
I just want to make a comment about potentially hiring a disaster coordinator from starting that process essentially when we founded the committee in September 2023 to now. I've been waiting for that news since September of 2023. And I couldn't be more excited, and I know that the committee is going to be pumped too, because they've been waiting for that for a long time as well.
Yeah.
Good things take a long
I
time.
know, apparently they do.
Sometimes.
Other notes? I would note in the next 7 minutes, to the extent it's appropriate, thinking about when do we think we should next revisit this or other updates. I will say, just speaking personally, I feel like we could touch on this every meeting. That might be more than we need to. And then sometimes I feel like I hear feedback that we're not doing enough or there aren't things in progress. So personally, I'm just thinking about what's the way that we're keeping this both on us as a select board's radar, on the community's radar, but being mindful about time. So I guess would just welcome input from other board members about updates, engagement, checking in on, in particular, this flood resiliency piece. Kane?
I think we should definitely sort of put this this list here on blast, and then I think for every update we get about a brick grant, or an update we get about the cornfield, or we finished work on armoring that sewer line, or armoring the bank, the sewer lines in, any time we get an update on something that has moved forward, we should be very vocal about it. I think adding that anytime to any select board meeting to just be like, hey, we've gone the next step in this particular project out of the many.
Thanks. Other comments? I saw your hand. Chris, do you want to come up?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Tom if you comment a little bit on what exactly hiring a flood disaster coordinator entails.
It's what would the person do?
Yeah,
So
you know, is it a full-time position, part-time?
No, it's a stipend position, budgeted $5,000 a year. The person would essentially lead the immediate response effort for the town. And the natural disaster handbook essentially stopped us after mucking out. So the mold remediation, the drying out is crew's issue to assist with or homeowner's issue. But the vision is, I think of it like the fire chief. The fire chief's job is not necessarily to respond to every fire, but to make sure there's enough people under his purview who can respond and they have the appropriate equipment and training. So this person would, we've talked about identifying, neighborhood leads who would work under this person. And so we have an apparatus of people that would report to this person, meet regularly, and be prepared to lead the effort for the community, for the town, in the event of a flood. I envision that as a cadre of, maybe a half dozen, somewhere in that range. And again, if this person, no one's available 24/7, 365, so if this natural disaster coordinator is, on vacation in Honolulu, I don't expect them to get the next plane back, but I expect that this cadre of volunteers are ready to go. So we're building a little bit of an apparatus. The fire chief would say you're hiring a chief and they're going to find some lieutenants. I don't think of it as quite in that parlance, but a little bit similar.
Director, facilitator, chain of command.
Yeah.
Basically.
And part of it is, some of the folks went in and mucked out and they wore full body protective gear, and some people wore their shorts and Crocs. I'm not sure you want full body protective gear, but maybe you don't want Crocs. So a little bit of basic standardization and training, I think, would go a long way.
Any other questions or comments on this topic? So we hear from Kane, propose around, if there's an update, share it. Any other notes with regards to checking in or updates on this? Mike?
I just want to really thank Kane for all his leadership dealing with the whole natural resource preparedness committee, for the name of it. You've done a really wonderful job. I know it's something that's really, it's something you really believe in, and I think it's important. So I think, at least on my behalf, a big thanks for what you've done to spearhead this for the select board.
Thank you.
It might be the perfect segue into select board liaisons, but I want to see if there's any other items on this. All right, if not, hearing none, Tom, feel free to stop sharing. Sorry for me always forcing that. This one has no visual materials. So next on the agenda, we had review of select board liaison role and assignments. I requested this, and again, we have 20 minutes for this, and I think I have two goals. One, this is another item that coming soon in March, I will just name March in select board agendas is a really busy season. In addition to the fact that we couldn't get Vermont State Police tonight, but they're planning to come in March, we have things like reorganizational meetings of the boards, more of our conflict of interest, our meeting procedures. There's just a lot of kind of housekeeping and administrative work. In my mind, these select board liaison roles would be another piece of that work. It's also when we start to tackle board and committee appointments. So there's a lot of that. I think going into it, again, the goal for the conversation today is, to the extent we can, having a shared understanding of us on the select board about what this role is. Is it attending every meeting? Is it providing updates? Is it a range? I think this is one of those things I think there was a general consensus. I tried to go back in the minutes. I think it was 2022. I recall Danny Kelman still being on the select board when this is first instituted, but I don't know that there was any sort of formal position description. So I think to the extent we can just talk through how it's been for all of us, and then also just some tactical nuts and bolts of, is anyone currently on the board or likely to remain on the board? Have ones, what openings might we have? I am aware of, like, for example, the library commissioners. I don't think we ever had a liaison to them. Do we want to have that? Again, I don't know that we'll get to all of that in 20 minutes, but I guess if we want to start off with folks' experience in the role and kind of expectations, what has or hasn't worked. I can start if folks want time to think, but Kane, I see a hand up already.
Yeah, I will say for my best efforts in the Natural Disaster Preparedness Committee is that I tried to act as a liaison, not a voting member, so I acted in an advisory role. This is something that, so when explaining something to them or they have an idea, it's like, well, this is something that the select board has historically supported, or this is something that the select board has not historically supported. So this is like trying to get the feel, trying to guide them through, like, so a lot of it is like, this is when we could get it before the board, this is, do I think that the majority of the board would support this? Do I think that they wouldn't? How do you think you should change it to get public support to any of their ideas? And then essentially just being the communication between the board and the committee is so invaluable, especially to them as a new committee. I think is the most important part of the liaison job, is to be the communicator. Because yes, we have email. No, we don't always answer them in timely fashions. And if any of the committees have some emergency situation or something they'd like resolved quickly, it should be the job of the liaison to make sure that it either can be done or that we can communicate to them that it can't.
Great. Thanks. Mike?
I agree with what a lot of teams said, but I don't necessarily think that we have to be at all of, a board's meetings. I'll be the first one to say I haven't, been to the board meetings, but I think the chairs and all the members know that I'm available to them. I always, if I am at a meeting, I always ask them, what are some things that are concerning to you that you want the select board to know? And I think that kind of dialogue's important, and you don't have to have that on an ongoing basis. I know, like dealing, especially with Amy, she's always, I look at, they have really good sets of minutes. I always review their minutes. I think that's important. And we always have discussions if there's something that's important to her. Sometimes it's not, because we have too many boards and stuff and other things happening, so it's sometimes impossible to make all these meetings. On the other hand, like the DRB, I know they probably, they just want some positive, it's basically the same thing every time I meet with them. They just like some consistency, and that's what they want to know from us. And I think that's what we might try to bring back to this board, that they want to know that the bylaws are such that they know what's expected when they make a decision, and they can do it, Otherwise, they say, we love to have you at the meetings, but sometimes they don't have a lot of real input. It's kind of the same thing. But I think it is important. I think the role that we have liaisons is important. As to the frequency and whatnot, I think it's kind of a touchy-feely kind of thing, how you think. And I always think that the chairs of those committees will tell you, how they feel they want you to participate. If they want something, they'll tell you. So.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, Ian?
I've got an interesting perspective, being this is my first year on the select board and my first year working alongside the recreation committee. Some things I've noticed that helped my role there was when he actually put me in their agenda and said, okay, now's the time for our select board liaison to speak. If there's anything to share, much like Alyssa, you've done with our select board meetings, just creating space for that. I think initially when I started serving in that role, it was tough for me to butt in. I wasn't really sure how I should interject myself, so creating that space was really helpful for me on that committee. And I think, as the more I learned that role and learned what the recreation committee was doing and was aiming for, I think a lot of my role, kind of similar to what Kane was saying, is this in the purview of the town? Is this what the town is looking for? Are we heading in the right direction? And I know, members of the Recreation Committee will talk to Tom directly, which is wonderful, but I was another voice to say, this is kind of really with the town. And that, for me, wasn't coming necessarily from me, but was checking in with different select board members, checking in with Tom and saying, you know, what should I be bringing to those meetings? And finally, I'll just say that I think how necessary it is for select board members to be liaisons to these committees, because we do deal with so many things with this town. It just makes us that much more connected to the different factors of this town. And that's hugely important, I feel like, for a select board member and for this committee, you know, who does talk about all sorts of different things, to be that much more connected to the different organizations around town.
Thanks. Roger?
Yeah, I'll agree. I think certainly one advantage of this system is to allow individual members of the board to take leadership in areas of particular interest and establish some continuity and real basis of informed viewpoints that they can bring back to the board, and also inform the various committees of conversations that may be reflected in the minutes or may not be, but they can provide their viewpoint, which, you know, has got the benefit of the most recent communications that we've had within the board. And I'd like to compliment you, Alyssa, for making space for this, because I feel like while I was chair, one of the things that I failed to do was really to have a feedback loop such that we didn't hear back from what was going on with the rec committee necessarily. And now that feedback is better established. So I think that is important as well.
Other pieces, Kane?
I just wanted to comment that it does make it feel a lot more legislative. That we line up our committees and they come
Right.
back.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's see, to the extent I can take off my chair hat and speak as an individual, well, I guess I'll give the summary first of, I'm hearing a lot from you around this communication piece, kind of both ways, again, to the committee about what's happening here on the select board, from committees back to us on the select board is something I think everyone mentioned. Consistency, communication, that voice and point of contact, whether it's elevating a concern or just being a touch point. And also this piece around communication, whether you're managing or whatnot. I'll say I was on the planning commission prior to joining the select board, so I was really excited. I will say we were meeting weekly for 10 weeks at the same time as the planning commission. I did not stay as involved. And so I think the pros and cons of the individual, I was just reflecting a lot on it's great to have one point person, and it can be really hard if that one point person is suddenly not present. Thinking about that, I appreciated some folks connecting with chairs about how to participate in the committees. And I will say, I've gotten feedback of, we have things on our select board agenda that are really pertinent to boards and committees. And that friendly heads up of, hi, we're talking about this subject tonight and I might have to do with you, and soliciting input. I will say for me, that's a real work in progress about could we think about using our liaisons to, again, we're having this conversation tonight. I did intentionally want this to be a select board conversation first as a select board liaison, but then is part of our role for each of us to go back and check in with our committee and say, hey, we talked about this role. This is what we're thinking. Does it sound right? Again, just using it as a resource for all of us moving forward. Another distinction that I am just appreciating is, Kane, you mentioned liaison and that you're a non-voting member. I will say for me, I am a voting member of the Housing Task Force, so that has been an interesting, when we created that group, we specifically built in a select board position, I think to ensure the continuity, but it's something I'm aware of in terms of how I'm participating. I saw Roger's quizzical hand, so Amy, would you like to add?
Hear me? Oh, I'm on my phone. Apologies. So thank you for taking this up too. And I wanted just to offer some real-time feedback from the conservation's point of view. And as Mike said, yes, he's always been very gracious with his time available, and we've kept him abreast of documentation, which has been helpful. I just also wanted to weigh in on there's also, we find some value in direct communication with the select board, specifically with times around decision making. For example, one of our more recent requests that we're making right now is we're put together a strategic plan. So having that available for you folks to review would be important. Budgetary things of that nature. And then equally, sometimes we're moving, I'd say, faster than recent history. Which means we also need some input on, I wouldn't say policy as much as I'd say things that may influence decisions in the municipal plan, for example. Did I cut out there? I see folks.
Yeah.
I see people. Okay, sorry. So where did you, the municipal plan, did you hear that?
Yeah, that was it, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So primarily, I just would want to vie for at least some form of maybe quarterly or minimally, twice or three times a year, having some planned or fixed time where we can come in. At least our commission, and I'm not sure about others, but I think that might be helpful.
Thanks, Amy. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
You're always welcome here, Amy.
Well, and I will just name, that regular check-ins has come in. I think to the extent like, Martha, please come in for the planning commission, but some of these things are like, if we can build the schedule and then it's a regular thing and no one has to remember, or we know that part of the role is making sure they're here at least once a year and defer to folks' expertise. Other more big picture things, so I'm hearing in general a lot of consensus on the role of something where we could turn this into a draft one-pager just for internal and external reference to get it more formalized. Do we want to take 5 minutes and just kind of tick through quickly where we have and haven't had liaisons, thinking ahead to next year? And also just if there's folks we should add, I will also name, like Ian, you said community groups, and I will name that kind of like the last time. I think right now we've done exclusively municipal groups, which seeing as it's select board liaison is appropriate. Discounting Roger's day job, I will note we haven't always had liaisons to like the RW Economic Development Committee has usually been staff. It's been the town manager. I'm trying to think if there's other equivalent organizations in town, but that might be beyond tonight's discussion scope. So Conservation Commission, Mike, you're our current liaison. Mm-hmm. And also Development Review. Look, they're right next to each other on the spreadsheet. One that I don't know if we've had filled is Edward for our utility district. I know it was Danny when she was here. Is anyone aware that they are serving as the liaison to the Edward for our utility district?
Who? Oh, Danny.
EFUD. I was Danny, and I don't know if we ever.
I don't think we backfilled that.
Okay. I met with Skip for an hour and a half today. Does that count? No. Okay, so I'm going to say that's a vacant for the time being. I serve on the Housing Task Force, so again, to the extent that's liaison.
May I
Yeah.
comment? Should we change from liaisons in advisory roles to full-on members of these committees? As you are a member of the Housing Task Force, and we are not voting members typically of the committees, should we become voting, should we write it in so that we are voting members of the committees that we liaison for?
I would argue, well, Roger has a hand up. My initial thing is some of the committees, we wrote it when we wrote the charter as a loose term, but the description of the committee, we did that, and we did it intentionally because we wanted to make sure there was someone. If you're becoming a voting member, you're changing a quorum and the amount of numbers on a board. So I would say I don't think that's a decision like we can just make without instituting it.
I wasn't suggesting we make it tonight.
Yeah, and I would say, and then it does, I guess, not in our current era, in previous eras, there has been quorum challenges. So if the select board member is then a voting member of the committee, and then the committee size goes from 7 to 9, you now need 5 people for a quorum.
Right.
So those are the ways I've seen that consideration show up.
Okay.
And I will say for Housing Task Force, in some ways it actually is more complicated. I will say, like, for example, that group wrote a letter about the 51 South Main Street DRB decision, which I had to adamantly say that I was no part of and recusing myself from for obvious reasons. So in some ways, it might be cleaner
I was at that meeting, I remember.
yeah, to go the other way, you know, and say that it's a liaison. But I think just when we created that group, it felt important to make sure there was select board representation. But I appreciate, Roger, do you want to weigh in further?
I think you pretty much said it. I think it really depends on the organization. Like EFUD's not likely to allow the select board to make its decisions for it, at least not right now. And but you know, the housing task force is notably different. So I just think we just have to do it on a case-by-case basis.
Chris, quick.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there'd be any concern on these committees that are formed, the committees from people that we ask outside of this select board to make decisions and come to conclusions about certain aspects of our town business. I'd hate to, for lack of a better term, tip the scale or put thumb on the scale one way or the other. You're there to allow those committees to do their job, bring that information to the select board, and then the select board takes an independent vote of those committees. So I'd hate to see that happen.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. This is one I said earlier, and to be clear, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, Chris basically said most of what I feel. I think if a commission, committee, whatever, they want someone to be a voting member, I think that's one thing. But I think, as Chris said, I think things come back here, and I think, you know, we don't want to affect the autonomousness of these different boards. And I think it's good that we're there as a liaison and advisor, not as a quote voting member, plus the fact that, you know, the whole issue of quorums kind of goes into play,
Right.
especially like if you're not at a lot of the meetings, that could affect their quorums.
Right.
Great, thanks. Lisa, you had a hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what these two gentlemen have just said. I think that being a liaison is one thing, or a point person, I think, as somebody maybe Payne suggested,
Advisor,
a point
yeah.
person.
Right, yeah.
And a point person is kind of different than an advisor, but you know, this goes back to, I guess, the theme of the evening for me is check and balance. And I think that when we have members of this board that go and they are a liaison, that's great, but when they start voting and they also start influencing those boards, as these two gentlemen have suggested, then it becomes problematic, I believe. So that's my take.
Thanks. All right, I'm gonna continue us along. And to be clear, this list was copied from the municipal website list of boards and committees. Library commissioners, as far as I'm aware, we have not had a liaison, is that correct?
Correct. I will say that I miss them on occasion, but I try to go to every library and cemetery commissioners meeting.
Great, so that is one that perhaps staff is a more appropriate fit. Natural Disaster Preparedness Committee, anyone know? Roger?
I was just going to say, for the cemetery and the library, we don't have any direct oversight over there, as I understand it. So that was maybe a reason that we didn't identify those as.
Separately elected boards.
Yeah, and I'll just name, I really appreciate the comment about quorum and whatnot, and I guess my only note would be some of these boards are intentionally subservient to the select board, so while I don't want to say that the select board is overstating, I think there is that balance between, we also want to inform them. I don't want to send someone on a wild goose chase if I think the select board has no interest in the outcome. I want to make sure we're using everyone's time intentionally, and again, I think there's a way to do that separate outside the question of liaisons and voting. I have been the liaison for the Planning Commission. As I've mentioned, it's quite time consuming, so if someone else is interested, I'd be willing to give that up. Ian, you've been serving on the Recreation Committee?
I have, yep.
And then Tree Board is another. Have we had anyone on the Tree Board?
Aren't they the tree commission now? Or did
No,
we
Tree
change it?
Board is the new name,
Oh,
I
Tree
think,
Board
because
is the
of
new
the, yeah.
We just have a tree warden.
We still do that one?
I have not gone to their meetings.
Okay.
I'd be curious, what day do they meet?
I don't recall, and I talk to the chair of the tree board quite often, and we do have a Caring for Kennedy grant that seems to be an annual grant that we get.
Great. Any ones that I missed? Anyone liaison with committees we don't know about, or other nonprofits or other groups?
Can I ask a question?
Sure, Cheryl.
I'm curious where the Historical Society falls under that, because it's actually listed on the website as a department. And it came up recently in a meeting, about the Historical Society's, relationship with the town and status and how it's listed there, so.
And you are a separate 501c3.
Yeah.
So I think it's listed as a department, but you're not actually a department. I think it's,
Yeah.
we're linked at the hip,
But
but
no
we're independent.
day of the week.
Right. It seemed weird listed that way, so while we were on the
Thank you.
conversation.
Part of that is just our website is a little bit clunky, so we should list you as a partner agency.
Right. All right, with that, it is 7:50, and I will move us on, just flagging, I will say, both partner agency, it sounds like one specific website fix, but just noting we didn't get into that tonight, and if and when we think we want to have liaisons to outside nonprofits, where we definitely wouldn't be voting liaisons, but best to get our own house in order first with this. So thank you all, we can revisit this moving forward. All right, next up, we have review and consider adopting proposed ethics investigation and enforcement ordinance, which is continuing the ongoing.
Theme of the month?
Correct.
Here it is.
Do you want to just,
Yeah.
oh no, I'm so annoying about how Tom shares.
And we are here.
And if you just X the little navigation, it will be easier to read for friends. at home.
Sorry, let me,
Not that one, in Word. Yeah.
want me to go?
Oh, no, it's fine. Anyway.
Can I remove these folks? How about that? Does that make it easier?
Yeah, that's good.
So this is 100% based on a model ordinance put together by VLCT with a few changes. So the first change is section D, and their model ordinance simply has every possible municipal officer. So, we don't have fence viewers in Waterbury, but they do exist in certain places in Vermont. So this is limited to just those entities we have. I do want to point out, you'll see on the list that DRB is not listed, Development Review Board, and that's because they are quasi-judicial bodies, so they're covered in item 2. I also want to point out that I am the collector of delinquent taxes, but I believe under the law, you could make that someone other than me, or other than the municipal manager. Going down to page 2, it's an important issue here in section D I wanted to talk about, and that's because at the end, there is a complaint form, and because this is evolving and there's no one new, I made myself the recipient of the complaint. That being said, section D, the standard language is, you do have a designated complaint recipient, and if there's a complaint against that individual, it would go to the municipal manager. We don't have a designated complaint recipient, so I'm suggesting that we can say municipal manager. If the municipal manager is the complaint recipient, it would go to the select board chair. But what I'm driving at is, I believe we're better served if at some point we find a designated complaint recipient that is not the manager, the select board, or staff. To me, the ideal person is honestly an attorney who's potentially retired and willing to do it.
That seems very pointed, Tom.
Because it's a complaint about an ordinance, and most likely, if there is a complaint, I hope there won't be, but it will likely be about the people in this room. So I think having an attorney, or someone at least with an appropriate resume and experience to review this would be the right call over the long term. And the more I delve into this, it really feels like that's the direction, that's where they want us to go, where the state wants us to go, and even VLCT. And then the other interesting thing about this is enforcement. The ethics law does not really specify a whole lot with regards to enforcement. And so it's up to us. But there's no felony ethics violation, if you will. There's no misdemeanor ethics violation. It's about the select board essentially doing their own enforcement. And that may be against their own members. And the focus again is really on talking about the behavior in public. But what's interesting is if the select board has an ethics complaint that it believes it's founded against one of its own members, there's no legal process to remove a select board member. The most you can do is request that that person be removed, or perhaps that person not be a liaison to a board or serve in a certain role. And again, I think this might be something that could evolve in the future. If it's an enforcement action against myself or a staff, there's a whole different role to play there. And an enforcement action can be appealed to Vermont Superior Court, which is interesting because the action itself might simply be a public admonishment. But under the ordinance, if you're publicly admonished for behavior that you think was appropriate, you can in fact appeal that to court. So it's a very interesting ordinance to me.
How do you appeal a public admonishment? You can't, there's no takesies backsies if you've been chewed out in public.
Once it's out
No,
there.
You can have a judge
you could ask a judge
rule
to,
that that the enforcement of the ethics ordinance was not done correctly or appropriately.
Okay.
But no, there's no fine. There's no fine.
there's
under the
no,
law.
well,
You can't if it goes to a judge. Judges usually can have finding
Well, there'd be
power.
an appeal right to a judge.
Okay.
So for section 4, I'm happy being the person who receives the ethics complaints, but I think that section could be modified today to say that if the complaint is against the designated recipient, and that is the municipal manager, it would go to the select board chair. But I am suggesting long-term, I think we're best served by having someone independent to receive the complaints. And then there is
Would it need to be, if it's an ordinance, wouldn't it need to be an office, not an individual?
No.
not the way it's worded here.
No, it would not. And then there is a relatively simple complaint form that follows. Let me just see if I have that here. That's not the chair.
Yep.
This was up there to deal with because it's a PDF that you've got to try to edit, so I'll figure that out. But the interesting piece about the complaint form I want to point out, there's really one, again, it's standard from VLCT, but there's one decision to be made here, and that is, will you allow anonymous complaints? And my advice is that you should not. I think if you make a complaint against someone about a matter of ethics, you're going to fill out the form, you should provide your name. If you go to the state police and allege a crime, they're going to say, fill out this affidavit. They're going to want something in writing. So I think this should be to the same standard, that you don't get to make anonymous complaints. I don't think that's fair to the person who may be the subject of a complaint. But that's my opinion. This is an evolving area of the law. obviously free to allow anonymous complaints, but I think that's the flashpoint on the complaint form.
Well, I think, that goes into facing your accuser and probably all the way back to Magna Carta. That a person has the right to face whoever's accusing them, whoever's complaining.
So for,
I said, even in a board like this or in a place of government, you should still have the right to face your accuser. Like someone filing a complaint against you, you should have the right to know who it is.
is this template from VLCT? It spells municipal.
Yeah, I know. And I just,
Sorry,
I
I'm not one on spelling, but
literally just bought a PDF editor on Friday,
oh my goodness.
Nice.
but, so yeah, there's a
Captain
couple.
Fancy over here.
And can I just clarify one more? Sorry, Mike, I'm going to let you comment, but for a decision tonight, Tom, we have this ordinance. Can we adopt it as warned? I'm hearing there's some potential edits, some potential questions about roles, a determination we need to make around things, but what needs to be finalized and what timeline?
I think if there's more conversation and there's more concern, then you shouldn't adopt an ordinance that you're not comfortable with. So I think this could wait until March. If you want to, that being said, you can always amend an ordinance. It's not a complex process. It's simply a warned select board meeting. So if you wanted to adopt this, the complaint form needs a little editing. It's not part of the ordinance per se. If you wanted to adopt this and specify that if the municipal manager is the designated complaint recipient, complaint made against the manager should be directed to the select board chair. I think the ordinance itself is okay. It is standard form.
Okay, thank you. Mike, go ahead.
I agree 100% with what Ian and Tom both presented. I think anyone who is accused of something is entitled to face his accuser. Otherwise, it becomes just gossip. I understand anonymity, and some people will not step forward if they can't be anonymous. But I know people who have been accused of some things, I would, in a court of law, they would have that right to face their accuser. And I think that's really important in this case. I don't know why we would adopt something, a complaint being anonymous.
Where does it say it in here about anonymous?
It's on the form itself, not
It's
the
on the
ordinance.
form.
Yes, on the form.
Did you have a handy in or?
Yeah. I'll push back and say I can think of instances when someone would not feel comfortable putting their name out there, feeling embarrassed, I think there's a whole list of things that could make someone feel inferior in that moment when they have a complaint, and I think that could be enough reason that they don't want to come forward and put themselves out there as the complainer. So I appreciate what's being said here, but I can certainly see a number of different cases when it would be hard for the accuser to quote-unquote out themselves in public because of the shame that might be involved in that complaint. Just put that out there.
Let me ask you, Ian, if someone would accuse you, would you want to know?
Yes, but I can understand somebody saying.
I know exactly where you're coming from.
Right, but and I think, I'm kind of putting on my teacher hat a little bit here, and sometimes students won't speak up because of the shame that's involved in them speaking up when they should be, but I think that's true for adults as well. But I certainly see the other side of this too.
Roger, you had a hand?
Yeah, I was just wondering, do we have a whistleblower policy?
We do.
And does that require the whistleblower to identify for himself?
It's in here.
So, I don't know offhand, and an event hasn't occurred since I've been here, but that's a policy that will need to amend come the next select board cycle when we adopt these, because now some of these policies essentially are made different because we have a law.
Yeah, it just feels as though that could be analogous and might be something we want to take a look at as well.
Other comments on this? I see Sandy's hand up. Go ahead.
I just wondered, and I can't read it here, but would that be public or just brought up in a meeting if there was an issue with a select board member? I mean, if it's given to you, what is, as far as, people not wanting to have their name out there, would it be public that they did it, or would it be something that you would keep aside?
So, it's a private process. If it involves a select board, it would ultimately go to the select board. And I believe that would be a valid executive session item if it's a debate and a conversation amongst themselves about whether or not someone violated the ethics policy. But if there is an outcome, that would be voted on in public session. And even before this policy, I'm aware of a few examples where select board members publicly admonished someone on their board. A couple cases where, boards traditionally will elect a chair for an annual basis, and the chair was unelected for that year. So this has largely existed. It just wasn't codified in the law.
Other questions or feedback on this? Oh, I'm sorry, Lisa, you're right behind Roger and Mike's head.
She's hiding.
No, I can understand all points of view, including yours, Ian. And while I can certainly sympathize with people who don't want to come forward, I would say if it's serious enough that they're going to make an accusation against somebody in this board, I do think that they should find the courage to actually, be willing to stand behind what they're saying. My fear is, we've seen it with social media, people when they're anonymous can get really nasty and say things that are inappropriate and or things that they don't have the evidence to back up. And so I would say that we should require somebody to actually identify who they are, as hard as it might be.
All right, so with regards to the ordinance, so we're noting that this complaint form would ultimately be a part of it, but does not technically need to be adopted tonight. How are folks feeling about the ordinance? Is there a motion with regards to that? Kane?
I would make the suggestion that we leave the wording as is, and come back, and plan to come back to the table on this after the election, or after town meeting day. If we need to change one or two words, it's not a big deal, but are we not on a timeline for, I thought we were on a timeline to approve this.
A law was adopted for us by the state. This is essentially our enforcement mechanism, so I don't think it should be put on the back burner until September. But if you wanted to take another meeting and do a little more due diligence on your part and get a little more comfort, I don't think that's inappropriate.
Okay. I'm seeing nods from board members. Ian?
Would it make sense to adjust section D or letter D under section 4 to state the municipal manager instead of our designated complaint recipient, or do you think that wording is fine?
I'm fine being the designated complaint
Okay.
recipient for now, but I think, and perhaps nothing arises, but I think you should say, if the municipal manager is the complaint recipient, complaint should then be directed to the select board chair. I'm also sending a signal that I don't think I should be the complaint recipient.
I think we've heard that.
Yeah, I got that vibe.
Yeah.
Mike?
I agree with Tom that I don't think either the select board chair or the municipal manager is the appropriate person I think it may be challenging to find a good person to fill this role, especially as a unpaid, volunteer to the community.
I will say that you also made me the ethics liaison, and that's to the state ethics commission, and I'm fine with that, because that's essentially
Right.
information share.
Different.
Can I propose a crazy idea here about D under section 4? We have two forms of government that have in this town, right? We have the select board, we have EFUD. What if the complaints went different? If there's a complaint about a select board member, it goes to the EFUD chair. If there's a complaint about EFUD, it goes to the select board chair.
They would have to agree, of course.
Right.
I'm fine with any of it. I would note, as someone currently in those roles, they are roles with candidly just time constraints. I would say I think that's
Okay, vice chair.
No, I don't care. I'm just being transparent that I love it as a creative solution of someone else. I would say this is a hard one for me. I think if we're asking someone else to do it, I feel more strongly about having it be not anonymous, because I think if we're asking a community member to spend their time vetting these responses, I do think we owe them the respect of having at least a human. And I would note that the enforcement actions are, even in the worst case, it's a recommendation to resign. So I think ultimately, the goal is to make sure, just to zoom us back up, I feel like this has been the big scary agenda item I'll just name to me for 3 meetings, hi, you just became select board chair, and hi, we have 5 ethics things you need to adopt. And I'm like, whoa, I'm just trying to run a municipal meeting. And so I think the goal is to make sure we're all doing the right thing. And if for whatever reason someone thinks we're not, they have channels to go through. So I think that's the bottom line of what we're getting at here. And so.
And has her hand raised and stuff like that.
Yep, go ahead, Amy.
I might have missed it, but has the discussion occurred that perhaps the town lawyer should be the recipient of these to kind of traffic control them?
We had the discussion proposal that it was not a municipal staff member or elected official. That suggestion has not specifically been raised. I would say my number one concern as the one who signs the warrants is it might be a fair amount of hourly hours before it is vetted, so that would be my one concern.
Are you suggesting that we have that many ethics concerns?
No, I'm just suggesting that as a default until I have a better sense of how this form is working with no other things. I'm hesitant to require someone to respond to something, seeing as we're fairly pressed to get standard legal advice given the constraints on town attorneys.
Okay, thank you.
Amy, I also see that as a challenge, and I'm actually thinking of a couple ethics issues that have arisen in the past, not with this board, but just some stories I'm aware of and have followed. One challenge is that, we have general counsel. I use some specialized attorneys at times, but the general counsel works on behalf of the town.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so there's a bit of an internal strife there to essentially investigate the board that employs it. So that's a difficulty. It would put the attorney in a bit of a bind, and they might not want to do it. And I can guarantee you if I called him, we'd have a conversation about that, and it would be lengthy, and there'd be some nuance there. Again, it's an ordinance, and it's new, and there are some complexities, so I think an attorney would be great to have as a liaison. I just don't think it should be general counsel for the town.
And I'm not
Thanks for considering.
All right, other proposed actions. So I'm hearing in general, we'd like to get further information on this before making final determinations. Tom, do you think it's reasonable to advertise for this person so we can just do it all at once? To the extent we can create a position description out of this to be the recipients of forms, that might let us take more tangible action. And we can finalize both the form and the ordinance at a future meeting.
And maybe check in with EFUD to see if they'd be willing.
Check with EPA.
And I'll
Roger?
just mention that we have a couple of prominent newly retired attorneys in town who I think we could probably make a couple of discreet inquiries to see if they might be interested.
Okay.
Great. Yeah, and just to note on Amy's point, certainly not disputing that if there was anything that warranted legal review, we would do it. Oh, well, I'm making a whole point for Amy, and the Zoom has disconnected, so let me just pause for a moment.
Did you do that on purpose?
Recording in progress.
Glad you all are back. I started talking and said, Amy, to follow up on your point, I just want to be clear, if there was anything that warranted legal review, we would of course be open to engaging that. It's just a correction around this position. Our plan of action is to see if we can get a designated complaint receiver prior to adopting this ordinance. All right. Anything else on this topic? Lisa?
Just a quick comment, I won't stand up there, but I kind of laugh when I think about attorneys actually being the ones to be citing ethics, because I don't exactly ethical people to go to. So I hope we'll be open-minded about allowing other community members who perhaps have worked in HR or a little more familiar with ethics. It is complicated, but it's not law. So I think we should maybe consider not going that route until we have to get an attorney involved.
Sure.
That's just my experience.
That's a good point.
Other professions? Other professions you would
Yeah,
suggest?
other professions, I'm sorry, say that again.
I'm really asking you, like, what other professions would you suggest?
Oh, I mean, they could be HR, they could be teachers, they could be HR, they could be anybody that's done any, I've taken tons of classes on ethics, and I think a lot of people have. I'm not meaning to minimize the importance of it, but it's not law, it is ethics. And if it were so complicated that we needed to get an attorney involved, we would. But I think there's all sorts of professions and non-professions. I think there's plenty of parents out there, so I just think we have to look at each person on a case-by-case basis and not have them required to have some sort of a law degree to do this.
Great. Thank you. All right, I will move us down to our next item, which is Better Connections Grant Application. We have a copy of this draft overview in our packet. I'm telling if you are sharing.
This might take a second here.
Yep. And this, I should specify, is a pre-application form. Katie Gallagher and Duncan McDougall have both been involved in drafting this. Katie is also a member of the Planning Commission. This is focused on the Waterbury Center area. I believe we have applied unsuccessfully in years past, and so looking to resubmit this application. Better Connections is a planning program offered by the state of Vermont. It's a partnership between both the Vermont Agency of Transportation and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, particularly focused on multimodal transportation and also economic development and community vitality.
Give me a second to just.
And I do recommend grants to communities for a living, so that was just some back of the napkin spiel.
Better Connections pre-application.
That's the one.
Am I sharing it? So this was discussed this was just a pre-application that was submitted about a month ago to the state folks to review this grant. We did choose a project name, but the short version is Katie and Duncan, I believe, presented this at a prior meeting. And they're looking at the area around the mixed-use core of the triangle, which is the center of this designated area. They've had a community meeting and they're actively writing the grant, which is due this Friday. They really want to focus on accommodations for pedestrians and traffic calming is even a part of it. And that's really the focus of the study. They did apply last year and they've since met and fine-tuned the grant application a little bit. It's also unrelated to the application itself, but part of what's going on in the background is that there's conversations with the state and they're interested in expanding the geographic boundaries of this designated area, which I think would be important because it is quite small. So I think that's the heart of it, is making this core area of Waterbury Center more pedestrian friendly, doing some traffic calming. And I think better positioning in the future. So it's all part of that conversation. They've also talked about better connecting it to the state park, which is a big deal, I think, from a pedestrian perspective, because crossing Route 100 is not an easy task.
Especially with a
Especially in
backpack
that
and a
area.
couple fishing poles.
So I think that's the heart of it. I know Katie explained it a lot more eloquently than I can. And there is a municipal resolution in there.
That's what I was missing.
Related to seeking the application. This is not to be confused with the downtown grant that was also approved and that was submitted today.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yep.
Yes.
If we are voting on anything today, this is my neighborhood, though I do not own property there. So there's no financial incentive for me to vote for this, other than the fact that the triangle is right out my bedroom window.
So the ethics law talks about these sort of issues, and if a member of the governing body doesn't benefit from something any more than the general public, there's not an ethics concern there. So I think it's good to talk about it, but I don't see any issue here whatsoever.
Okay.
We love disclosure. Anyway, other questions or comments on this? Tom, I'm noting a 10% match. If I recall, this is like a $60,000 grant. Is that correct?
Yes, I haven't seen the exact budget, but it's in that range.
And do you think that's attainable already in current budgeted amounts for planning?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other board members? Kane and then Roger and then Amy.
I will say that I think it would behoove us to apply for this grant as Waterbury Center, and specifically that whole surrounding area from Cold Hollow all the way down to Neelan Flats, and then the areas in between is partially walkable in parts, right? So Maple Street's walkable, that top section of Gupdell, Howard is walkable, but then we've got, people driving 65 down the rest of Gupdell, so. And then, of course, crossing over to the state park on a busy day in the fall is impossible, which is crazy that I need a car to go the 100 yards to the state park. So I'm a big supporter of working on this.
Roger?
Again, just for full disclosure, connecting Waterbury Center to the efforts of revitalizing Waterbury on the downtown has been a priority for revitalizing Waterbury for the past couple of years. And I was asked by Duncan to submit a letter of support on behalf of revitalizing Waterbury, and I did so.
For this project?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Amy? Or go ahead, Tom.
just to be clear, will you recuse yourself for that reason? Will you recuse yourself for that?
I will recuse myself on this vote, yes.
Amy?
Yeah, sorry, so in terms of this grant, does this commit, if awarded this grant, are we committed to perform the actions?
No, this is to hire a consultant to assist with the study.
It's a planning grant.
Okay, sorry, all I can see is section 7, so I'm not clear on what the terms are. Will this be posted?
Yes.
Perfect. And then community events, where was the best place to keep, look for kind of events that are planned for this discussion? In being Waterbury Center, but not in this particular area?
So we'll put
I
them
haven't,
we'll try to put them on the news section of the website and Facebook.
And just be clear,
Okay.
Amy, this is a description for funding to undertake this study. It hasn't been awarded, and we're not committing to doing it if this grant isn't awarded. We're just considering the potential application of this grant this evening.
yeah, no, thank you for clarifying, yes.
Mike?
I am very much in favor of the grant. We've talked in infinitum about connecting Waterbury and Waterbury Center, and Waterbury Center kind of doesn't have real identity other than having a post office address, and I think it's just a conglomeration of a lot of things, and I think, fleshing out in a grant, it's similar to what we did with the whole big dig in downtown Waterbury, looking at how our community can act better for the long run, and I think this is a positive thing. I just don't know, I would like to see what the results of the study were and what the costs are gonna be and how we would go about it, but I think it's worth exploring.
Great. So with that, I guess I would look for someone, hearing no dissent, I would look for someone to make a motion authorizing us to sign the municipal resolution for the, sorry, I just closed my thing, resolution for Better Connections Grant for the town of Waterbury. Do we also want a letter of support, Tom? Was that part of? Or is this sufficient? Just
I
the,
believe this is sufficient.
it is after the description of the project prior,
Couple more
4 pages in from the back.
4 pages in.
Resolution for Better Connections Grant. It is a form, so someone,
Okay. So we're authorizing the signature of the grant.
And in
The
section
grant.
3, you can authorize me as the local project manager.
Okay. I move to authorize the signature of the resolution for Better Connections grant application and name municipal manager Tom Lights as the project manager, is that correct? Yeah, as project manager.
great. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Kane, second by Mike. Any further discussion on this item? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Motion passes with Roger abstaining. Does someone want to carefully, do you have an excavated one?
It'll be scanned, so
Okay.
it's careful enough.
Okay. I don't like to rip the corners with the things. All right. We will move on from that.
I will say that also that is my stomping grounds, and I run, and it can be deadly along Guptill Road, Newman Flats, the Triangle, Maple Street. Sometimes I think it's safer to run on the wider shoulder of Route 100, which is insane that I just said that out loud.
Thanks. Tom, you're good at sharing. This brings us to our Select Board and Manager informational updates, which again, as has been previously named, informational updates in general or for the boards and committees where we are liaisons. Again, not a time for discussion, but flagging any things for future discussions. I'll start, and I have fun handouts because we received a postcard at the municipal office for Municipal Mornings with Kathleen. Kathleen Ramsey works for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. She was the former Town of Middlebury manager. They are free. I will pass these around. Everyone gets one. I have already registered for Select Board Organization and Onboarding on 2/27, but there's a whole series going all year, everything from hiring for summer rec to budgeting roundtable. Again, recognizing VLCT serves some towns with almost no staff. That's not us. But anyway, sharing for informational updates. And Cheryl, do you know the date of the next Housing Task Force workshop?
Yes, it's March 17th.
Okay, and March 17th is the date of the next Housing Task Force workshop, so get wild doing. So if anyone's, it will be recorded and on Zoom. I attended the last workshop on Zoom with our planning and zoning staff, and we have a recording. Is it already posted? Anyway, there will be recordings, so.
There is one, yes.
For folks who are interested. Thus concludes my updates. Roger, anything to share?
I don't have anything to share today. Thank you.
Yep. Mike, anything to share?
Nothing major. Thank you.
Yeah. Ian?
I do have a couple things to share from the rec committee. We are meeting tomorrow, but I got an update today. So a couple things that just to point out, summer camp registration is going really well, where they filled almost every spot at the camp for the summer. All the 8-week slots are filled, and there's just a couple weekly slots left open for rec camp. A couple other things. Katie is doing drop-in workout classes at the rec building. Wednesday and Friday mornings have gone really well, especially those Fridays. The kids' night out that the recreation committee has, or recreation department has been hosting, are popular with kids in attendance, but not a lot of kids are showing up. They haven't been able to get a critical mass, so they might not keep those going. A couple other things, I haven't given an update in a while. The Christmas tree bonfire, which was a while back, was awesome, had a huge amount of attendees, 75 I think was the number, and a bunch of people stayed pretty late even after the bonfire. I'll say all of Winterfest was successful, namely the ice disco was a huge hit this year, that they plan to keep going. Big shout out to the Ice Center for hosting that. I think there was 350 attendees. They collected roughly the same number, maybe 325 pounds of food for the food shelf, and also collected money for the summer rec program sponsorships. And yeah, I think that's about it for the rec committee.
Thank you. Mike?
Ian, you mentioned that the camps are almost filled. Do they have enough counselors at this point?
That is the question.
Because I see a lot of the refunds when we do the warrants.
I think they're planning on hosting 104 kids this year, and they say that they should have all of their counselor interviews done by the end of March. So they're feeling hopeful about those counselors.
I know last year it didn't work out quite well.
We won't know until the end of March, but I think all signs are pointing to the ability to host 104 children.
I'm really pleased that they didn't schedule registration for town meeting day, which is historically when it was done. So I've sat up on the podium at town meeting day, I'm getting angry texts from parents because the last 2 years the system crashed. And pretty tough to deal with that day.
Yeah.
I also like they did it early and also to try to give themselves more time to find help.
Thanks, Ian. Kane, any updates?
No updates from natural disaster.
Great. Tom, any pertinent updates to share?
I just want to let people know I had a meeting with Owen Seti Ducati with RW and Joe with the Housing Task Force. And I'm hoping and thinking that your first meeting in March, they can have a formal program ready for consideration. That's, in essence, Waterbury's version of the VHIP program.
Any other updates? All right. So then, as I noted at the beginning of the meeting, we have executive session scheduled for labor relations agreements. We do anticipate returning after executive session, not for action, but for our subsequent agenda items to review the town meeting motions and logistics. Rebecca said she'd be here at 8:45, so maybe that's good impetus for the board to be brief. But for labor relations agreements, we would need a finding that premature general public knowledge would place the town of Waterbury, or is this the one I was wrong about?
We've been warning it this way.
Okay, so then yes.
I move to find that premature public knowledge of a labor relations agreement would place the town of Waterbury at a substantial disadvantage.
Second.
Motion by Kane, second by Mike. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, and then we would be looking for a motion to enter
I
executive
move
session.
to enter executive session.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, so it is 8:52. The Select Board is back from executive session. We took no action in executive session. So that will bring us to our next agenda item, which is review of the warning and logistics for town meeting. And I would note that our town moderator, Rebecca Ellis, is here. Do you want to come sit with us for this? And I also want to especially credit Rebecca. So for reference, we are working on the not included in the packet version of the warning. Tom provided extra copies because it has Rebecca's track change edits, and then also from me, names of who agreed to read each of the various motions. So hopefully we are doing as close to possible as of a true run-through ahead of town meeting. Tom or Rebecca, any opening remarks with regards to going through this?
I think we just go article by article.
Yeah.
Great. I would just note that our town, there was a Board of Civil Authority meeting before this that obviously Karen, the town clerk, and all the justices of the peace were at. They have a sign-up schedule, both obviously for polls for the day for town meeting. They also assigned separate slots for the potential of a paper ballot, so they will have justices of the peace available to do counting and administration of that if folks call for a paper ballot, and you can speak to that process, Rebecca. And also just a note in general, there is childcare being provided for town meeting. There is a form they're encouraging folks to sign up that is in the town meeting information banner on the homepage of the municipal website. I think that's all I have. Do you have the most recent copy? Do you want me to give you one with the names?
That I edited?
It's the same one, but then I threw everyone's names on it for fun and excitement. Yeah, you got one. And you still have, there's some in the back, Ian, on that table, the smaller pile.
Great.
But otherwise, yes, it's exactly your track changes. I just added the select board names right before the meeting. So great, I guess that brings us through. So Article 1, Roger, you were the only sign over. Any notes, comments on this?
I just want to know that the first bill passed by the legislature this year was to make it possible for you to elect town moderator on the floor and elect your other elected officials by Australian ballot. There had been some question as to whether or not that was legal, and now it clearly is.
Some or all, and signed and good to go?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. So obviously 2 and 3, not part of our meeting on the day. 4 is the reports of town officers. I agreed to do that one. 5, I had TBD Roger. You said you might be able to find someone to make this motion for us.
I think Skip will do it, but
Okay.
I need to confirm.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just noting, we have confirmed in the town report, these amounts are all correct, right?
Yes.
Okay, I know we didn't intentionally change anything, I just want to make sure.
This was Article 5 for Skip?
Correct. Pending confirmation. All right, Article 6, Kane, you volunteered for this. We had some clarifying language from Rebecca. Any other comments on this? Tom, Article 6, work?
No, just that Article 6 and 7 in prior years were one article, but I just thought it was such a mouthful that making it 6 made a whole lot more sense, so that's why they're separated.
And then, of course, our moderator is going to ask that I comment, or if I
Right.
have comments on it.
Yeah.
And we had moved the date in August, right, so that it didn't coincide with,
As best it can, not interfere with EFA billing.
EFA, yeah, not interfering,
Receipt.
but interfering with water bills.
Or Bennington Battle Day.
Which we don't have off, so.
Great. Anything else on 6? All right, that brings us to the second half. Now, Article 7. Mike, you had agreed for this?
Yep.
Any other questions, comments?
No?
All right. Article 8. So this was the adopting budget articles as opposed to a traditional floor vote. Roger, you agreed to speak on this one?
Yeah, I guess,
Do you support this motion? Because that was one question I had, is that the person making the motion is gonna have to explain why they think it's a good idea. So,
I honestly do not feel strongly about this. So if someone does, someone else can take this on.
Well, it's interesting, and I would note, we had a dialogue at our last meeting, almost the opposite, which was we had select board members, and then we had comments that some folks have expressed strong feelings in one direction or the other, and desire to have someone who hadn't as strongly do that, make the motion, so.
they don't have to strongly support it, but what I will do, and you don't have to answer this, Roger, at town meeting, is normally I give the person who made the motion the first option to talk about it. If you don't want to, I could just not ask and just say, open for discussion.
Go ahead.
I think Roger would be a good one, because I think he can explain the pros and cons. Yes, as he said, he wouldn't take a position, because there are a couple of us who probably have stronger opinions, pro or con. We made the decision not to have either of those individuals present this article for that exact reason, because of, you know, a propensity to like this article or not.
And I did actually talk to Maureen Harvey over in Duxbury about the process that they went through and how that it increased the number of people that were actually involved in the voting process. So I'm happy to discuss why this is on the ballot.
Okay. And then there's, you know, a fairly good chance that, you know, I'll ask people after the whole discussion, I'll ask people for the ayes and the noes. And there's a good chance that, you know, I won't be able to tell who's winning, who knows? So the next step would be to ask, I can ask, or it can be a motion for a division of the House, which people have to stand, and then we have the town clerk and the Board of Civil Authority, I think, or maybe it's just the town. Karen's gonna have someone else help her count the people who stand up. I won't be counting. And then if that's close, or even before we get to that point, people can also ask for a paper ballot. You just need 7 people to ask. And then Karen has it all, as you said, arranged to do a paper ballot. But basically what will happen is people have to come to the front. There'll be a separate list to get a ballot. People get their ballot, mark yes or no, and then put it in a box, because we do have to keep track of who voted and make sure that it's only people who are members, are citizens of Waterbury who vote.
Thanks. Kane?
If 8 or 9 come to a paper ballot, that's gonna take, I would say, probably a considerable amount of time. Do we,
20 minutes to a half hour.
right, do we continue with that, the paper voting on Article 8 or 9, or both, and move on to the next articles as that is happening?
Yeah, while people are voting, I can't move on, but once people have finished voting and the clerk is counting the votes, we can suspend the rules to go on to the next thing. But I looked at it, and I think it would make sense to actually not go from 8 to 9 while we're counting the ballots on 8. So I was gonna propose that we actually just skip ahead to Article 16. We just do as much of Article 16 to 26 as we can. Those are usually pretty straightforward. I mean, we can skip ahead to whatever we want, but those seem to be ones that would be nice to get done earlier.
Article 16 or 15?
I have it as 16 would be, I would just move to 16. We could move to 15, but I was gonna move to 16 and get, 15 is a lot of words. And so I was just gonna move to 16 and, you know, those go quick, so. Then when the votes are counted, we'll, go back to Article 9.
Can you repeat again the procedure? If we ask for a voice vote and you can't really tell ayes and nays, and then the next step is you divvy up?
So we don't have to go through all 3 of those votes. I mean, it could be right at the beginning, someone says you know, I want a paper ballot, and we would just go straight to paper ballot, or someone might at the beginning could say division of the House, but sort of in the order of accuracy, basically. Like the voice vote is when basically everyone agrees, and then the next is division of the House, that's when people stand up. And then the next after that is a paper ballot. And so you can ask for division of the House or paper ballot at any time along the process.
And how do we know that everybody there is an actual community member?
Because what will happen is if we go to paper ballot, is people have to come in front of the room, there will be a checklist to get, you know, the voter checklist to get your vote, and then you'll check it off and you put it right into the ballot box. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll probably call people up alphabetically by last name, to also, we don't have everybody coming up all at once.
Great. And it did come up because realistically, we have about 15 justices of the peace the select board can serve, but not if they're on the ballot and not if they're at the front of the meeting for town meeting day. We're going to have 2 folks in the back checking folks in just to vote, even while town meeting day. So we're just naming that. There's probably going to be, 2 or 3 folks doing this. So to the extent you can help facilitate it. Chris, did you have a quick question?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I hear Roger's concerns, and I don't know that, from my point of view, that his job is necessarily to put out the pros and cons as he sees them. I think his job is more, because that's subjective, depending on who's talking about it. I think his position should be more of explaining why it has come to the warning, and then just let conversation ensue from there. And that may make you a little more comfortable about weighing one side or the other on it.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
All right, so that's Article 8. Roger, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah,
That feels
yeah, I
good?
think I can do that.
Yeah, I think I appreciate the in general, like, premise of, could note that we've asked this as an advisory question in previous years, just the facts of how we, again, arrived at the current situation. All right, so then the next one, and then again noting, is everyone comfortable with assuming the rule of suspension? We're hearing Article 16 would be the, I want to make a hyperspace jump joke, but anyway, we would zoom to.
If we go to paper ballot, we'll, during the counting of the ballots, we'll go to probably 16.
Is there a procedural issue because Article 10 references spending in those other articles, and if you don't approve the wording in 10, are you doing it backwards?
No, because 16 through 26 are all the special articles, so as I added things up, you did not include the special articles in.
Yeah, on purpose.
Yeah,
So
so we're all set.
I worked on the wording for Article 10 5 times over the weekend, and I hated the prior wording. It never made sense that you're approving the budget, but then approving other expenses that impact the tax rate. So I actually rephrased it very similar to you in the end. One change should be here. When you say pledge any additional amounts approved in Articles 15 through 26, it should say 13 and 15 through 26. 14 is the local option tax one, but 13 is the capital.
Oh, right, I'm sorry, yeah.
So, but I love that wording.
It would be 13, your capital improvements are not in there, so you don't have to do.
But they're part of the tax levy. That's where the weird issue is with this article over the years, is you approve a tax levy and a rate which pays for those other articles down later, but you don't always, it's just a weird article to write. But I think you're,
Let me see how you did.
Your proposal is in Articles 13 and 15 through 26, Tom?
Yes.
Is that your proposal?
So 13 and 15?
yeah, because the warning specifically didn't reference the $520,000 in capital in that article because it's voted on separately, but the tax levy has to go somewhere. And we don't vote on multiple tax levies, if you will. So we don't in article, whatever, 18, say, shall we give 2,200 for Central Vermont Council on Aging with this impact on the tax rate? We vote on one tax rate.
Right, but I thought-
One thing you could do, and I think how we used to do it, is for your capital funds, you're raising 510,000 for highway capital and 10,000 for the recreation. Out of your, from the tax rate. And what we would have done before is put an expense in the general fund, or general expenses for recreation, and an expense in highway for your capital, and then did the transfer over. So you have that actually 2 different ways in your budget. And I think that actually would be the easier way to do it.
Yeah, and I don't want to split hairs, because I think in the end, it's pretty transparent for people.
Yeah, that's sort of where I was coming from, but if you wanted to, make it, be transparent as to why the tax rate is 55 cents. Well, you're raising the you're very clear about how much you're raising.
Right.
So, and what that's gonna be in the tax rate, so I thought it was fine,
Okay,
so,
I won't argue with you.
yeah.
I will say, as the one too who also got called out on, are we setting it on tax rate or are we setting it on dollars? If we can set it on, I appreciate that we're including the estimated tax rate, but right, just to, I have Mike is speaking to this, right? We're being cleared that we're putting the anticipated tax rate. We have no reason to believe that isn't correct, but we are setting on the dollars, not on the tax rate.
Right.
Last year, we wound up setting on the tax rate. Evan, you had your hand up earlier.
Oh, yeah, it's about Article 8 and 9.
Okay, if you can be quick.
Yeah. I was just wondering, since they are separate questions, is it possible that they would both go to a paper ballot? And if they did, would they be separate? Or would they be combined in some way?
They'll be separate.
Okay. And what would that look like? Like Article 8 goes, people like vote on it, and then you go to discussion on 9, and then
People would vote on it. We'd have, so the way the checklist is gonna be at the front of the room is it'll have everyone's names, but it'll have multiple columns. So, I mean, who knows, you could have 10 paper ballots.
Right.
So, I don't think there are actually 10 columns, I haven't seen it. But there will be multiple columns, so you can do multiple paper ballots. But you have a separate vote on each article. Yeah.
And one on that, I don't think I said out loud, but we did say, Ian, reviewing which of the articles on this are public questions, because we anticipate we likely will have the question of like, what even is a public question? So just that we should review ahead of time,
Yeah.
reports of town officers is a public question, and, what items, so that we can speak to that if there's
Yeah.
questions.
I'd like to dig in that further.
Yeah, I can do that with.
Okay.
Great. Sorry to backtrack a little there.
Good point.
Rebecca's suggestion, to be clear. Anything else on Article 10? All right, Tom, you're okay with the
Yeah.
proposed wording? All right, we had Article 11. Kane, you agreed to speak to this?
Article 11.
Fire truck.
I did it last year, I'll do it this year.
I think your biggest question on Article 11 is not gonna be the fire truck, but it's gonna be to
Take it from
use
the-
the tax stabilization
Yep, take it from the
fund
tax
and to
stabilization fund.
repay from the local option tax. So I think both of those parts of that question are gonna elicit some conversation.
Right, and I mean,
And I can,
what good is a local option tax if not to pay down debt?
well, I think the question will come from about the tax
Maybe more the
stabilization
tax
fund.
stabilization.
So the tax stabilization fund has over $1 million in it. There was an older town meeting day decision to limit the amount that can be borrowed, so it can't be reduced, I believe, lower than 640. And so, on paper, yeah, you have 2 articles that add to 690, which would get you below, but in reality, one, we have a positive balance in the local option tax now. We're getting another distribution in 3 months. 2, the highway truck, we won't pay a nickel for quite some time. And so it's part of the cash management process. And those are maximums. Up to is up to. Is that,
So
you think
you-
is an answer that's sufficient, that, based on what you expect?
You want me to answer the public's questions with, this is a cash management.
Yeah, I think you should turn it over to town manager when it gets to that.
But I'm behind the curtain saying no more.
No, I think if somebody objects to using the tax stabilization fund and they say, hey, let's borrow money, let's do a short-term note instead, I will rule that not germane or out of order, basically, because I think that's too far from what got warned. And then I'll always make it clear to people, like, the body is actually making up the rules, so that would be my ruling, and then if the body wants to overrule me, they can. So, I just want you to know, like, if somebody says, I don't want to use this tax stabilization fund, but I support fire trucks, so I want you to, borrow, short-term note from the bank, I would say you can't amend that article to say that, but then you can object and have people vote to overrule me. That's the great thing about being town moderator, like, I can do nothing wrong, it's actually you making all the decisions.
No, I can either turn it over to Tom, or I can just speak to the fact that we have over $1 million in the tax stabilization fund, and we fully intend on paying it down with a local option tax in no less than 3 years. So,
Yeah.
or no, right, whatever the language says.
And I think on this, the more compelling is we don't expect a payment, right?
Right,
It's gonna take some time for all this to come to fruition.
right. and we
So
don't
that's, I think,
We don't
the-
expect it.
And we have existing cash balances, so I'm not gonna borrow money from the tax savings if I don't need to.
Maybe I'll just turn it over to the manager.
Well, I think it's also, it would be good to ask the fire chief to talk to the need for the fire vehicle, so,
Yeah, he
That
will
would be
there.
good too.
He will be there.
I mean, I'm sure he'll be there, so we can call him. Good?
Works for me. Next is Article 12, where I will take all of the same notes, but maybe ask for Chris's opinion about gravel. No, I'm just kidding. But it is for a public works vehicle. Again, same funding mechanism. This we anticipate purchasing sooner, but again, also in 2 parts. But again, I would
Yeah.
turn that over to Tom. Question, Mike, yes?
The only question I have about this, I always believe in a lot of transparency. Should we be saying public works vehicle versus what we are actually buying? Not to the name, but we're buying a tandem dump truck.
I've looked at some prior warnings and it just said public works vehicle. We can certainly talk about a tandem dump truck, but
I assume Melissa's gonna speak to that in her discussion of the motion, what it is, and I'm fine with that. I just didn't know how the logistics, because I know people like to know what's in the warning.
Roger?
Is it, this is the motion, but then you're going to ask her if she wants to speak to it, and during that time, she can identify exactly what type of public works vehicle she's talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Anything else on that?
Well, you could really go the public way if you had all the specs on the truck and everything.
Yeah.
Noted.
Full schematics,
I will
How many
say,
yards,
right, we can bring it.
material?
blow it up on the big whiteboard behind us. Here's the schematics.
there's a personal bingo in there somewhere. I never thought I'd be making that motion, so it's exciting. Article 13, capital improvements, which we've already named, and Rebecca was clear in noting that it's the 510 in highway capital expenses and 10 for recreation. Ian, you're on that. Questions with relations to Article 10 that we will now get about this, or no? We're just having it as a standalone?
Yeah, I think if people said no to the capital expenditures,
Then we would tell
your
them,
tax rate would probably not be so high.
we would tell them that
But-
estimated tax rate would be estimated quite a bit lower.
Okay.
We want to say that out front.
Sure, I mean, you can say that the tax rate that was approved, up to the 55 cents, includes raising enough money for that expenditure. If
Yes.
that, I don't think it's gonna fail, but if it did fail, then, you as a select board have the discretion to have a lower tax rate.
and I'll say biasedly as a member of the select board, I would frame that as it's included in the estimated tax rate from Article 10. In short, we're not asking to raise additional,
We're not raising it,
I mean, we're asking to authorize these expenditures, but that was included in that, if that's what we're saying. It might make it more complicated. I guess to me, these are important priorities for the community, so. And I think important priorities for us and the board, noting the public works vehicle right before it. So, yeah, I just don't want it to seem more complicated and.
Yeah, for this, I'm guessing it makes sense to break down people will be able to see the expenditures within capital improvements, but
Yeah.
does it make sense for me to reiterate what this is?
Yeah.
I'll get all that detail ready for you. Well,
Thank you.
yes.
All right. Are we on to Article 14? Roger again, all the hot buttons.
I know, Roger.
Yeah, it really is.
Really
It's
taking one
going
for
to be
the
a very
team.
exciting day for me. But fortunately, I have practiced this during Have Your Say Day. So
I thought you were gonna say in the mirror at home.
That too. Yeah, I think I understand all of these proposals, so I can go through each one as written and then address them
Good practice.
Again.
Same day.
Yeah. Yeah. But, and try to stay away from the word goop. Talking about resurfacing the shallow end of the pool.
I love the goop.
I think the likelihood of its passage hinges on using the
On
word
goop? Okay, well, the goop will get us through, I'll use it.
All right. Anything else on that, on Article 14? Right. 15, this was a blank one. I don't know if, again, we
John
were.
Malter has agreed to.
All right, John Malter, thank you for getting
Malter.
Can
confirmation.
you do the long one?
Yeah.
Is it required to read it, or can someone say, I move that the town during 2025 appropriate all the warrant items in Article 15?
If you suspend the rules, you can do that. So what I usually do though is we read through it once, and then I would say if there's no objection to suspending the rules, I will not read through it again.
Okay.
But then we read through it at the beginning, and then at the end, I read through it again, because by the time we get to the end, people don't even know which article we're on anymore, so. And there might be a change, when the, numbers are there. All right, well, thank you, John Mulber.
Great.
And then 16 through 26 are, from the floor.
From the floor.
Anyway.
Yep.
And then you didn't put other business on the warning, but I'll ask people at the end, is there any other business that people want to discuss? It's not binding, it's advisory only, but just to give people a chance to talk. There's also lunch, right?
Is there one?
Yeah. Yes,
There is
there's
lunch.
It's now confirmed, okay.
Yeah.
And is it free this year, or is it?
Yes.
Suggested donation?
Free?
Yep, so there is donation and it's paid for. Liz talked about all this.
Okay.
Yeah, at
Yeah,
BCA. The biggest question that Rebecca and I had talked about was an anticipated number. I guess we'll just name that, like, Karen had emailed and said, should we get 500 lunches? I said that seemed a little high, because even if we have 500 people, I don't think 500 people will stay for lunch.
Or fit in that little cafeteria.
Correct.
100.
And I think the other more procedural question is, we don't anticipate taking a lunch break, right? Because,
So this is the thing, I think this meeting's gonna go long. And I am a little worried that if we recess, for an hour to take a lunch break, or even half an hour to take a lunch break, that, people will not come back. So what I'm gonna suggest is that when we get near 11:30, 12, or whatever time lunch is being served, that people just on their own go downstairs, eat, and come back up, and just, have to think, what is that called when you do it in, in a row, not all together, so that we don't lose the floor, and that people can get sustenance for the long debates.
They're gonna lose
Would it be
five
not
feet.
decorum just to have them bring their food back to their seat so they can continue voting while they eat?
It's okay with me, I don't know if the school has any rules though about that.
I don't know either.
Eating a Captain Jim.
Really?
Yeah, not a big five-course meal, but I've seen people have, sandwich or something like that.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's fine with me, but we should just make sure it's okay with the school if people bring their food
Yeah.
out.
As long as they fuss themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
Would you like us to get you something?
No, I will have a large spread of food inside the podium.
I highly recommend the empanadas.
Cheese and ham and like some drinks.
And we can just pass a tray of Oreos back and forth.
I now want a podium. Did you have something, Tom?
No.
Any other questions, comments on this?
Yeah, and just to emphasize, like my role is really to help people participate in the meeting. So if people beforehand, I should say to the TV, beforehand have questions, they should feel free to ask me, how to present a question, or if during the meeting you have a question, we can always take like a short little recess and people can come up to the podium and I can explain like what the options are. So, it can be, it seems formal, and I am pretty formal when I'm up there, but we can take little breaks and help people along if they want to ask questions or change the process.
So how would they go about doing that?
So like, you can just raise your hand. You have to like be in order, come to the mic and say, hey, I want to, whatever, I don't know what the question would be, but I want to split, this question. Here was one thing I was thinking of, like, I want to split question number 14. I want to take up the, $25,000 to highway capital fund needs first. How can we do that? So there's various options, like, well, do you want to just amend this so that we change that from 25,000 to 0? We can also like split the question, so that people vote on the $25,000 first and then vote on the rest of it. So there are different ways depending on what you want to get done. And there's usually multiple ways to get the same thing done, but happy to help people.
Chris?
Yeah, is there, and you don't have, obviously don't want you to say who it might be, the recipient of the Keith Wallace Award, has it been anybody designated for that this year? And if
Yes.
so, has that all been taken care of? And
I believe it's all taken care of.
Skip Flanders said the plaque had been ordered, and I leave it in his highly capable hands that it has been executed. In other town meeting business, Karen did say she anticipates the printed town reports tomorrow. They were delayed due to weather, but she had a list of locations in town for distribution, as has been the case in the past. So that was another update. And I will confirm lunch with her tomorrow, but again, there will be lunch is the bottom line.
Yeah, so there's lunch, there's childcare, that's awesome, it's all free. There will be usually anyway,
Not free.
well, it's by donation, but I think that as I understand it, the town is also providing a guarantee of the cost.
Yeah.
So,
who's
what,
providing that?
I believe it's the senior center, right?
Is it?
Oh, yeah, the senior center is doing the
Yeah.
lunch, yeah.
There will be short breaks also for presentations from the state legislators. I don't know if there is any more.
Chuck and Walter talking trash.
Well, John, I think last year talked during, and I can talk to him about this, I think it would be Article 10, because the solid waste costs are part of the regular budget. So that makes most sense for him to talk then.
Is there no, I know Bill Doyle was passed on, but is there anything like that that's come on the scene or that they're gonna have a town meeting?
Oh, his,
The Doyle poll?
The poll that
His
he-
survey, his poll, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen anybody doing that. Yeah.
Just curious.
I'll say I have a friend who has an intern who needed a town meeting to attend, and so she contacted me and said, can my intern come to town meeting? And I said, it might be a wild one, but they're absolutely welcome, so we'll have some guests, I think from UVM, who will be sitting in, so
Do
looking
we know
forward
if
to
we're
it.
gonna have press at the event, outside press, like the television stations attend?
I have no idea.
Well, Lisa will certainly be there.
Well, I know that's kind of a given, but I'm talking about like Channel 3, Channel 5, you know, those ones who have come here and there. They usually, and usually it's gonna be, I think they may be there because of the town meeting potential vote. Because they like coming to Waterbury because it's close to Burlington and
There are
Kennedy.
some pretty contentious bond votes in Burlington I'm sure they're gonna wanna be around for.
But it's not a day meeting, it's a Australian ballot.
All right.
I had one question
Yes.
on Article 10. Last year, Katarina and Rachel spoke, and do they want to speak again this year? I know just because last year, because they're not residents of Waterbury,
Right.
I just did this little special thing to make sure they could speak, but do you know if they're planning to try to speak this year or no?
I haven't finalized any plans with the staff and the board yet about what department heads might speak.
Okay. You can let me know.
You know, library had a big budget increase last year, and Katarina was new, so I thought that was a great chance. But we'll get there soon enough. I'll let you know.
It doesn't matter, I'm just curious. Okay.
And we will have to make that motion for Tom, assuming
Yes.
you already had that in the script.
Or not, that's fine.
I would request we make that motion.
All right.
How are we dealing with non-residents? I know in the past, not in the recent past, but we used to have non-residents be up in the balcony.
Yeah, I will ask, I have it in the script, I don't know if I actually did it last year, but I remind people if they're not residents that they can't vote. Sometimes what I do is, in the script is, that I have, that I didn't do last year, but I ask people who are non-residents to raise their hands, and then remind them that they should not be voting.
Right. But they could speak to different articles.
If we suspend the
Right,
rules.
especially, right.
Do we have to make a special
Because a lot of times, because I'm
allowance
a
for our
firm
town
believer
manager?
in the special articles, it's nice if you have someone from the
Sorry,
organization.
Tom, you can't vote.
It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, if there's not a town resident who can speak to a special article, we can suspend the rules. With no objection, just let them speak.
Yep.
Right, any other town meeting business? March 4th, 9 a.m., Brookside Primary School. Register online if you would like childcare. It's linked in the thing on the webpage, and otherwise hope to see everyone there. So then our next item we have is there anything else on this topic? Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Rebecca, for coming and coming early. We appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you at the podium.
My chorus, I'm sure, missed me for 20 minutes.
Oh, you had important town business to attend to. So our next item was next regular meeting agenda. We don't have to spend a long time on this. I mostly wanted to have it on the agenda so I could name that we did try and get Vermont State Police for today. They were unavailable, but are planned in March. And then, as has been named, we have a hefty amount of general housekeeping. Is there any other items folks want to flag looking towards March 17th?
I just think sidewalk should probably be in the parking lot for a little bit, just because we want to get out on them in the spring, and we can give you a better assessment when it's not covered in snow.
Were those all puns? We want to get sidewalks in the parking lot, we want to get on top of them.
All right, on that punchy note, any other next meeting agenda items? Otherwise, I would look for a motion to adjourn. Mike?
Are we doing, since we didn't have the state police update, are we gonna have that then?
Yeah, the plan is for them to come in March, yeah.
Okay.
I move to adjourn this regular meeting of the Waterbury Selectboard.
Second.
Motion, second, it's non-debatable. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're adjourned.